Hello, and welcome to the Third Degree Masonic Podcast. For this episode, I will be your host, Brother Turco, and I'm joined today with our really close friend, Brother Ricky, as our co-host. Ricky, say hi.
To be here. It's always nice being here on the podcast and being invited back.
Yeah, thank you for kind of doing this with me while Brother Gabe and Brother Sam are kind of indisposed for the time being, living their lives and whatnot. But hey, show must go on. So
we'll call it a side quest.
Yeah, there we go. Kind of talked to those two and asked them, hey, could I just borrow the microphones for like an hour? Didn't tell them what, but hopefully this gets actually aired and they don't veto me. But it'll be an interesting little episode. So as you listeners can tell, like this isn't my normal gig. I'm usually the one sitting behind the mic making them sound great. So sorry about all the ums and whatnots, but we'll get through it. It's going to be a great episode. Brother Ricky and I have a very fun topic to kind of talk about. We did some research and we really liked the cartoon episode. It kind of resonated with us young folk, if you will. And we kind of started looking into what are the kind of things from our childhood had Masonic meaning or symbols or whatnot that we didn't see. And me and Brother Ricky were kind of talking a little bit, and we kind of came to the same point of video games. They've been around since we were way young, and the N64 and the Wii or Xbox One and all that.
For me, it was the Sega Genesis, my first love.
See, now N64, full way. And so we decided, you know what? We're going to make an episode of this. We're going to kind of do what Sam did for the cartoons and kind of look into our past and see what games went right underneath our noses. And turns out there's some Masonic meaning to it. And we'll be sharing that with you guys this morning, evening, whatever time you're listening to the podcast on. So, Brother Ricky, let me kind of start this off with kind of telling our viewers a little bit more about ourselves on the video game aspect, so we're not just picking at random things. As you know, since you were one of my groomsmen and received one of the letters that I sent out, is my very favorite video game series is the Legend of Zelda video games. I remember playing Ocarina of Time with my brother when it first got released and spending way too many late night hours beating dungeons, exploring the forest, going to save Hyrule and everything. And then after that game, it was Majora's Mask or Samus. It was just childhood. So, but I'm still a video gamer, not as much as I used to be, because growing up, you kind of have to push out the things you love for the things you need to do. So, yeah. But what about you, Brother Ricky?
I've been lucky that I haven't pushed many of the things I've grown up loving out of the way too much. But like I said, my first game system was a Sega Genesis. I used to get babysat by a friend of my dad's, and that's one of the things that they had. And for some reason, it was just I just fell in love pretty quickly, especially like Sonic. Oh man, I played Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic Adventure 3, Sonic and Knuckles.
That takes me back. Sonic Adventures 2, I love, what was it? The very first mission when you're going through the city, escaping from Dr. Eggman on the skateboard or hoverboard or whatever it was.
That's GameCube. That's even later. Yeah, so Sega Genesis had the old school side-scrolling like pixelated Sonic where you moves. So like I grew up playing that. There was an Aladdin game, there was a Batman game, there was a few others, but that was like my first game system, and I liked that so much. And then we had moved, and I had like a new babysitter, and I hadn't played video games again until I was probably about another 3 or 4 years. And then my dad's friend had a PlayStation, and then I was able to play things like Crash Bandicoot, Spyro. There was like an army game where you got to ride around in a bunch of different like military style vehicles and like shoot at things, blow things up, like be a helicopter and like travel like over top of the world and like pick different destinations and stuff. That was really cool. But like for probably a year or two, Crash Bandicoot and Spyro were like my favorite things to do. Every time we went over to my dad's friend Joe's house, it'd be maybe 5 to 10 minutes before I was asking, "Hey, can I play the PlayStation?
Yep,
Hey,
yep.
can I play Spyro? Can I play Crash?"
I'm glad I'm not the only one that was doing that when I was younger. Whenever my family, extended family, would have get together, and I always knew my cousin had an Xbox or a PlayStation or some sort of game system, I'd be eating and I'd be like, "So after I eat, can I go play his games?" And well, you gotta get his approval. And my cousin was, God, I think he's 5 to 6 years older than me. So I was the little like brat pretty much running around like, "Hey, can I play on your game console? I promise I won't break it or anything." And like, well, luckily he said yes most of the time, but that's where I'd spend most of my days and stuff, just chilling in a bedroom and just sitting there watching the graphics go on and whatnot. So, but I know you saying Spyro just, it unlocked a memory for me. It's amazing how you'll play a game and you'll just be like, "I'll never forget this. I'll never be able to like relive this," but it'll be cemented in my mind.
That's the beauty of the storytelling experience. And that's one of the things I appreciate so much about video games is a story that's unfolding. And rather than read about it and try and imagine the characters, the settings, the plot, which is great. And I love to read. You can be one of the main characters or a side character or do the mini games and have everything visualized for you. And you can be such a better participant in the story as it unfolds.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that's kind of why we both thoroughly enjoy another game. It's not a video game. It's a role-playing game, and I think you already know what it is, Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, yeah.
And me and you have went back and forth as DMs, like talking about stuff and whatnot, and we both have that spark where we could just sit there for days talking about stuff. Well, what if I do this? Well, what's going on in this part of the world? Like, I realize the characters are here, but I want to know about here, and I think that's where the video games kind of come from, is like, okay, yeah, the main quest says to go over to this castle, but I'm more concerned by the building over there that's way off the map.
Yeah, I mean, like, for the Icewind Dale book, the Rime of the Frostbane, why have this whole giant, spoiler alert, magic, necrotic, decayed city under an iceberg when it could be, in fact, an oasis for dinosaurs? I love dinosaurs. Some of my friends like dinosaurs. I love dinosaurs. Why not have dinosaurs in my campaign? Sounds like a them problem, not a me problem. I'm going to have dinosaurs in my campaign.
So, but we are getting a little bit off topic. We're just reminiscing. Sorry, listeners, but this is just how me and Brother Ricky are when we get together and start talking about stuff. Before we know it, we'll be talking about something over there in Australia or something. Don't know how we got there, but we'll sit there for days and just talk about. But going back to the main topic of this episode, video games and Masonic, I don't want to say like secrets, but like references or emblems, phrases that's kind of found their way into the video games and stuff. Now, I know you did some research and I did a little bit of research, and we kind of talked before the microphones started recording, but we didn't want to get too much into it because we wanted this to be a pure conversation. But it sounds like we kind of intermingled a little bit with the like resources. Like we were kind of like, "Hey, did you hear about this?" Yeah, and we kind of talked about it. So we may overlap a little bit, but it's all going to be fun and good. And as we're talking about the video games, just think about, hey, did I ever play that game? Did I ever hear about it? Or if you're by a computer or a smartphone, look up the game. Look up what we're talking about. I guarantee you'll see the same things we're saying, and you'll be like, wow, I never knew that and stuff.
Yeah, and there's kind of like an interesting amount that I didn't really think about. I mean, there's a couple of games for me that come to mind like pretty quickly when thinking of like, oh, could there be anything Masonic inspired or like relevant to, related to Masonry? And one of the things that I wanted to talk about or bring up is how there's a couple of different groups that are often associated with Freemasonry, and people kind of think about them in the same bandwidth, more or less. And that's the Knights Templar and the Illuminati. And these are two groups that, like, whenever somebody says, oh, Freemasonry or the Illuminati or the Knights Templar, a lot of people usually think about one or two of the other ones. And there's just so many iterations or instances of those two groups in video games. They're a lot more frequent and a lot more common than Freemasonry. But in real life, there is actually no connection between any of them. So it's also kind of like an interesting way to think about how there's like this philosophy between how we connect ideas and groups and stuff, and how you and I might connect parts of like our identity with enjoying video games or enjoying a variety of different storytelling experiences like D&D or other types of games. And other people can think about how, okay, there's one secret group or one secret society, and oh, they must be like another secret society or another secret society. And one of the things I wanted to do was kind of debunk a little bit of that.
Yeah.
So for any of those listening, there actually aren't really many historical ties between Freemasonry and the Knights Templar. The Knights Templar is actually a much older organization, and they have been around a lot longer than Freemasons have. Freemasons, we have some philosophic roots older than the 1600s, but it wasn't until around the 1600s that Freemasonry became an organization and started developing its own sense of culture and working on all the different things that Freemasonry has today or built off of to get to today. One of the only real ties between the Templars and Freemasonry is something I've talked about before on another podcast episode, which is called DMLA. DMLA is a youth-sponsored organization that the lodges help to house and help chaperone for events, or help to kind of drum up some resources for them to go out and do fun things or charitable events for themselves. But the only real tie there is just that DMLA named themselves after Jacques de Molay, who was a Knight Templar. And in fact, he was the head of the Templars at one point in time. But that's really the only link between the Freemasons and the Templars. I mean, I'm sure there's probably a lot of Templars who may have become Masons, or a lot of descendants of Templars, and maybe there were, different ideas or philosophies that were gained in Freemasonry because of anyone who was a Templar joining Freemasonry. But historically, there's not really a whole lot of overlap between the two. And the Illuminati, I believe most listeners have their own ideas and opinions of, but I mean, it's a conspiracy theory that there's a secret group or organization who runs the world. But I promise you, I don't think they'd let two people who are in that group sit on a podcast and talk about some of their favorite video games and some of the links between that group that's super secret and these video games.
Yeah. One game that I was kind of surprised by, and going back to that Templar thing, is Assassin's Creed. That was the first game on my mind when we were talking about video games. Is, oh yeah, they talk about Masons and all that stuff, and I was going back through scenes and stuff. I'm like, oh, because obviously when I was playing Assassin's Creed, I wasn't a Mason. I was just like a regular guy. I didn't know anything about. So when they were saying Templar, I was just, my brain was auto connecting it to, oh, that's the Freemasons. Oh, that. But now as I've grown up and I've kind of learned a little bit more, and going back through it, I go, oh, wow, the first Assassin's Creed doesn't have really any Masonic things. They do talk about the Templar. I mean, the whole game you go through and follow. Sorry, I had to breathe a little bit. Follow Templar legends and hidden symbols as such, kind of like what Freemasons do with the square and compass and the G and stuff. But besides that, there's no real connection. Unless a listener can find that one little sentence that I can't find, and there's no reference in the very first Assassin's Creed with Freemasonry. Now, jump forward a few years and go to Assassin's Creed 3, and they do make a reference to Freemasonry. They actually kind of, I would say, a two-parter kind of thing. I'm sorry I haven't had time to actually play this game, so I had to do most of the research just on Google and whatnot. But they actually have a character in there, Hathan Keenway, who has a cloak on, and if you pay attention to the design on his cloak, right in the middle is a square and compass. And so that's, again, they never say, hey, he's a Freemason. But why would you have a square and compass on your cloak if you're not one back in those days? And then there's actually later in the game, you visit the Green Dragon Tavern, which if you're a historian, you know that tavern. You know that's pretty much the founding of America, for the American War of Independence and stuff. That's where a lot of brothers met before the Boston Tea Party. And that's where they kind of, I don't want to say scheme because that makes it sound evil, but planned the Boston Tea Party.
For those of you listeners at home who don't know, the Green Dragon Tavern is a pub that used to be located on Union Street in Baltimore. It was very well known for being frequented not just by Masons, but also by the Sons of Liberty. And if anyone knows their history or remembers much about the beginnings of the push away from England, the Sons of Liberty were the ones who were the first to step up and say, this is not okay. This is not what we want. We want to, we want to be governed differently. We want to be governed by ourselves. You're living across the ocean. What do you know about what we need and what we want? And a lot of the early founding fathers, many of them were Sons of Liberty or involved in the help and the push and the support of the Sons of Liberty, on top of being Freemasons themselves. Almost, I think, roughly a third or a quarter of the founding fathers were Freemasons.
I think it was a third.
And so both of these groups frequenting the same pub, and being so well known that, like, historically you can look up a variety of different events or like conversations that are speculated as taking place at this pub because of ties to letters or ties to certain events, and how it was known that these two or these few individuals met together, possibly even at the time secretly, but later on, as we learn in history, maybe not so secretly because they were seen or heard of, or they kept track in some way, shape, or form, evidence that we found later on. But the Green Dragon Tavern is one of the places where, even though it no longer exists today, that was where some of the founding ideas for America as a country began. And it began over a pint.
Yep. Kind of jumping to the next game that I kind of stumbled across was Age of Wonders 3. This was released in 2014, which was only 10 years ago. Same year I graduated high school. That's how young I am, guys. But I remember when this game came out, I used to, and Ricky, I don't know if you ever played it, but Age of Empires, did you ever play?
I did not.
Okay.
I am aware of it.
Okay. And that, I saw Age of, and I was like, oh, it's a spinoff. And I looked into it. It is and it isn't. Like, I didn't get into the necessarily crossovers or differences. I just was like, I mean, it's a turn-based strategy video game. The goal of the game is just expand your empire. Like, pretty much build more, upgrade more, and just kind of take over the realm or whatnot. But in that building, or in the empire, you have to build various buildings, blacksmiths, all that stuff. One building has a very unique title, and if you look at the symbol next to it, it has a very unique symbol. It's called the Masters Guild, which, for those listening that aren't Master Masons or know Masons, Masters Guild just, it sounds almost too Masonic. It just, knowing the ritual, knowing like all that, it's just like, that's way too of a quinky dink. And then looking into the symbol, again, it's a square and compass. And you're like, okay, now I see where you're going. Now,
and it's not the usual square and compass either, because usually we see the square and compass like intersecting because one is laid a little bit over the other, but inverted. And in this one, we have a little bit of separation. It's almost like a diamond.
Yes. And I remember reading about it that, and I don't know the legitimacy of this, but it was almost a not approved design. Like, they sent it out or posted it, and apparently they got a little bit of feedback and was like, you can't use that symbol, blah, blah, blah. Symbol still stands. So I don't know what ever happened with those arguments. Maybe they just fell on deaf ears and they got settled or whatnot. I mean, anyone can put a square or a compass.
Yeah.
Freemasons don't own those symbols.
Maybe even the separation of the symbols is what was eventually decided on, rather than having the traditional square and compass oversecting.
Yep. I'm sure there was a little bit of legal battle. I mean, it's no different than us trying to put Coca-Cola, the logo on. Hey, you know what? I really want this on the side of my car and stuff. Just a little legal battle.
And a little bit more historical context again for you listeners at home. So one of the philosophical roots that Masonry has its roots in is the stonemasons who were building King Solomon's Temple. And a lot of the organization of a group, especially a group of people who pursue a specific trade, we typically call that a guild, or in some way, shape, or form, they would act and function as a guild does in many video games. You can play World of Warcraft. I remember back in the day when I used to play Halo on the computer, people had their own guilds and they would still function to some degree in a very similar manner, where it was like, okay, these are the things that we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. These are the people who are in charge of certain things. And this is the events we're going to do on a weekly or monthly basis. I mean, people who play Destiny or play Diablo, like you all know about raids, raid bosses, raid rewards. So in video games, there's still some idea of that like kind of connection between culture and that connection between having like the identity of a group, and how that can be so easy to transition from one storytelling medium to another, like over time. And just as in Age of Wonder, there's a guild, there's a specific group of people of the trade. Masonry dates our philosophical idealism and many of our lessons way back to those stonemasons who built King Solomon's Temple, to those guild members or those individuals who function very similar to a guild.
Yep. And it's funny because that building, once you get it, you can start researching libraries, you can start building leaders, you can start building hospitals, and kind of going back to that guild portion is like, it's hard to explain, but some listeners are getting this, and the words are escaping me right now, but I remember playing Call of Duty, and back when Black Ops first came out, or Black Ops 2, and you'd always see those 4 little letters right before someone's gamer tag, and that's their guild that they were a part of, their group and stuff. I remember joining a guild, and I thought it was just, at the time, I just thought, oh, it's just cool little 4 little letters and no, they had a full-on Facebook page, and hey, like you said, we're going to meet on this day, like online. We're going to talk about this. This guy is going to lead this party, and you guys are going to go play this version of the game. You guys are going to go play Destiny and all that stuff.
On like the forums and rules and expectations for how to behave or how to go about playing the game. And like, that's some of the fun of video games sometimes, is having that social connection and that social expression to kind of participate in another community, or almost like another society outside of the ones you're usually in, where you have the daily 9 to 5 or work third shift or whatever you do for work or for school or whatever your usual daily expectations are. It's nice having that kind of getaway, but even when you get away, some of us are drawn to structure of sorts.
Yep. So it is kind of funny that you mentioned World of Warcraft, because as you know, because I know you've done the same research or even further research, is they don't talk about Masons too much, or really at all. Like, there's no quest to go find this or go explore the secrets of Freemasonry and Worldcraft to this day. Now, they could be developing something, and that's going to be the next expansion. But there is a quest in there that, and I forget the title of it, and unfortunately I didn't write it down.
I believe it's called the Divinomatic Rod.
Thank you. I knew it was some long title, but after completing the quest, you get a item called the Mason's Fraternity Ring, which, again, it's just kind of like, hey, you said the right words. Like, I know what that means. Like, yeah. So, and I guess doing this research just kind of made me smile a little bit, just because it's like, hey, this isn't just one little lodge, or this isn't Northwest Ohio. This is like, there's Masons out there in every position you can think of. And they're like, you know what? I'm going to add a little thing for my brothers, for my lodge. And like, for the developing team, they may not understand it. Like, the Masons fraternity ring, they may be like, okay, that's a weird name, but sure, that's Greg's problem. Whatever, move on. Let's worry about this temple. Let's worry about this dynamic and stuff. But it's also kind of nice when you're playing the game and you're disconnecting from life to just relax or get into that like fun little like competitive sport or whatnot and talking with your friends, and then all of a sudden, oh, hey, that's a Masonic thing. That goes back to my lodge. Like,
yeah, it's a fun Easter egg when that Easter egg can kind of be like a little more inclusive to you as a group. I know like today there's a very politically charged environment no matter what topic you bring up or talk about, but I think most of us can enjoy when we are experiencing a story and we can connect with the character or see something that's relevant that we can take away in our own personal life. And whether it's because you play a specific sport or because you have specific ideology, it's cool to just know that there's other people out there that you've never met who share similar views or similar expectations or a similar story.
Yeah. I mean, I love video games. I love playing them. I wish I had more time. If I could somehow increase the time in the day to 26 hours a day, I know what I'm doing those 2 hours. I mean, when Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom came out, you can ask my wife. Like, whenever I came home, I was like, I don't give a shit about anything else. This is what I'm playing. And some things went to the wayside that should have went to the wayside, and now I'm trying to desperately crawl my way back up and get back to being clean, getting back to on time and all that stuff. But it was just those few weeks of me just coming home after working 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. and just playing for 2 hours before I had to make dinner. It was just nice and relaxing. And it kind of brought me back to those young days of playing Ocarina of Time with my brother on my family room at my parents' house at 2 o'clock in the morning. So, but again, kind of getting a little bit off topic, but I'm sure the listeners love listening to me talk and talk about all my research. But before I continue with mine, how about you, Brother Ricky? What games did you find that kind of surprised you that they had? Any games from younger days when you were playing with the other D-Malays?
Yeah, well, not necessarily from playing with the other D-Malays back in the day, because we mostly played a lot of Halo. And just FYI to all listeners at home, Halo 3 was my jam. You can't put me and my friends in a room and let us play Halo without it eventually turning into 5 or 6 or 7 on 1, and I still spank them as if they've been misbehaving and breaking things throughout the house. It's one of the few joys I have in life where I can claim I'm good at that. I don't know who all else is good at Halo 3 out there. I'm not trying to challenge anybody. I'm just stating I feel like I am confident in my ability to play this game, at least against my friends, and make them regret spending a couple hours with me. But Final Fantasy is one of my favorite game series ever because I'm a big proponent of the storytelling experience. And one Final Fantasy game in particular that actually uses some, not just like physical symbols that you might find on the side of a Masonic building or like a Masonic group or activity. They actually use a sign of sorts that the characters act out that we use in Lodge today. And that was one of the things I found like really surprising. And I don't know if this is like an Easter egg that was put in to any degree, but as anyone who's played Final Fantasy X can attest to, when you go into a temple and you talk to whoever's in charge, trying to get that summon from that temple or get like a little bit of a lead for the continuation of the story, there's a specific like series of movement that's like part of a prayer, greeting, welcoming thing that each of the characters will do, or will do it like some of the statues. Part of that prayer, greeting, welcome thing is something that we use in our symbology in Masonry, and it's really interesting that again, I don't know if it's intentional. Maybe it's an Easter egg. Maybe it's not. Who knows if there was a game developer for Square Enix at that time saying, hey, wouldn't this be cool?
Yeah.
But it's just cool and interesting seeing some part of a video game experience and being able to connect to it at a deeper level. Because, I mean, I haven't played Final Fantasy X in quite some time. Brother Wilburn has replayed it a number of times because it's one of his favorite Final Fantasy games. But, I mean, before doing my research for this podcast episode, I never even paid attention to it, never noticed it, never thought about it. Not that I was a Mason when I played it for the first time or the second time, but it was just like so interesting to see that and be like, wow, that's so interesting. And it's interesting to me, not just because it's a tie to Masonry, but in Masonry, we have some, semi-religious ties. We have some ideas about what the purpose of a temple is, and we use the temple as terminology in some of our degree work. And so that specific greeting / prayer / welcome movement being used in accordance to access to a temple or somebody involved in a temple in the game just kind of like hints at that deeper layer or a way that I can kind of perceive that specific movement.
Okay. Yeah. And that's one game I'm not very familiar with. I'll be honest. Final Fantasy has never tickled my fancy. I've seen it. I've seen gameplay. I've had multiple friends praise it. That's the best game ever. I don't know what it is about it. I tried playing Final Fantasy, I think 14. I know the listeners are going to freaking kill me if I get this wrong for those that are diehard Final Fantasy fans, but I played it for maybe an hour or so, and I was like, yeah, this is just not for me, and uninstalled the game, and just moved on with my life, found another game, and started playing that and stuff. I don't remember exactly when it came out or what I was doing. I know it was more recent because I think I got it on the computer on Steam or something. So, but no, I did kind of see that in my research, and I was like, I'm pretty sure Brother Sam really likes this game, but I was like, sucks that he's kind of busy this episode because I'm sure.
I'm bummed. I'm so busy.
We'd be sitting here until 3:00 in the morning talking about Final Fantasy X if we let him.
Don't tempt me with a good time.
But one video game that kind of didn't surprise me that it had Masonic things is Tomb Raider, especially Tomb Raider 3, Adventures Lara Croft. I mean, always looking for secrets, always going through dungeons, always kind of going. So I'm like, okay, this game is legit uncovering secrets. Freemasonry is always linked to, oh, they're a secret organization, like what we talked about earlier, or oh, they have secret money, and oh, they have all this stuff. So I was like, there's got to be a connection here somewhere. And to my surprise, or not to my surprise, there is. In the game's City of London level, I'm not even going to try to say the section because there's a W, a Y, and a C, and it just confuses me. But Laura uses a key to access a special room. The key's name is Solomon's Key, which is a very well-known person in the Mason community and is also linked to Freemasons and stuff. So there's that. And then that key, like I said, goes to a very special room. It's not just any room. It's not just, oh, hey, this is just some janitor's closet that leads down in the basement. The room's called the Mason's Room, where she retrieves a Masonic mallet. There's way too many connections there not to be like, okay, the game developers meant to put all this in. Like, it wasn't the intern just sneaking something by and stuff. It's like, no, they took dedication and time to look into it. And even when you're going through everything along the walls, and the actual key itself has a square and compass on it. Like, they definitely took some time. Now, I was very impressed with the dedication and how much time they put into it, because the other games we kind of talked, except for Final Fantasy X, they did little snippets where you may not notice it right away, but like this, it was like, oh wow, they really wanted to make sure you noticed it and really appreciated it.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's always really really is if you've come across something in a game and they put in the time and the effort and you can really understand what it is or its significance or its relevance, and they add a couple layers to it, you can laugh about it, you can take some joy or entertainment from it, or it's just something that helps to create that memory for that storytelling experience, which is great. And as you said earlier, Tomb Raider is all about, Laura's always seeking to uncover different secrets, find lost, hidden information. And there's so many historical ties with a game like Tomb Raider, kind of like a game like Assassin's Creed, where there's a lot of different historical places that you go to. There's a lot of different historical events that are talked about or referenced. And it's almost like this little mini dive through history to some degree, but it's got this lens of maybe not mysticism, but this lens of like a fiction that's added to it, where we can add on all these other elements and put a spin on it to make it more enjoyable.
Yeah. So, but okay. So besides Tomb Raider and Final Fantasy X, for the record, what other games did you find that kind of tickled your fancy?
One that really tickled my fancy is Batman: The Telltale Series. So I'm a huge nerd when it comes to comic books. I will say I do err a little bit more on the side of Marvel than DC, but I do love both. And for those who haven't played it, Batman: The Telltale Series is all about Alfred being kidnapped by Lady Arkham. And in the story, Batman ends up working with another character named Lucius, who pops up in the movies, in the comics, and is kind of like Batman's office Alfred, more or less. He helps him out with a lot of different things. But like when you lose, like your go-to, your butler, the guy who makes you soup and sandwiches when you come home after fighting crime in the streets, I would be upset, just like Batman was. But in the process of looking for a variety of different clues, trying to find out what happened, and how to, get Alfred back, Lucius actually points out, Batman actually points out the Masonic symbol in some of the clues that they're looking at, and they actually go to a house that is well known as being like the Lodge, because there's only the one lodge in Gotham. So it's very easy to know, oh, that's got to be associated with this specific place, because Masons, even in the game, they're somewhat recognized as like a worldwide group, or a group that stretches to a variety of different places and stuff. It's still, understood that that's a symbol that has to be dealing with them. And we only have one spot where they meet in the city. So obviously this clue is tying us there. That's where we need to go. That's where we need to go check things out at.
What's actually kind of nice, and I don't know if you know this, do you know the name of the building?
I do not remember the name of the building.
It's Gotham City Fraternal Order of Stonemasons. And that it just kind of like they went that little extra step. They could have just left the Masons stamp on there and just was like, okay, yep, this is all we got to do. But to even go a step further and say, oh, there's only one Masonic Lodge in all of Gotham, and it's called the Fraternal Order of the Stonemasons. It's like, okay, they're linking it more to just that conspiracy a little bit. They're kind of going back, kind of what we were talking about earlier about, hey, some Masons and the Masons today are kind of linked and whatnot. So I did kind of also see that, but I want to see if you kind of found that too, or maybe I'm just going too far down this rabbit hole and just finding those conspiracy theories and just making fact out of nothing. So, but yeah, no. The other games, do you have any other games?
I do. Another one was Deus Ex, which for those of you who like the kind of conspiracy aspect of games, or even like Assassin's Creed, having the opportunity to go around being sneaky, Deus Ex is a great game series to do a little bit of that. So at one point in time, at the end of the Deus Ex game from 2003, the main character, like you get, asked to join the Illuminati, or their version of the Illuminati. And this is at the end of the game, so spoiler alert, sorry audience, but at one point in time, like the Illuminati is just one thing that kind of like usually rings the, oh, is Freemasonry associated bell. But another part is at one point, as the main character is asking for help, he specifically uses the word help for the widow's son. For any listeners at home who are Masons, you're going to know that phrase right off the rip. There's a lot of, we'll say, emphasis in Masonry for being charitable, but being charitable most especially for widows. one of the worst things in the world is to lose the person that you're most connected to.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about a group like the widow's son, or a group of people who have lost like their father figures or their fathers due to a variety of different reasons, that's something that's like really distressing and really difficult to deal with. If you lose a mom or a dad, like that's one of those role models for you, right? That's where you learn a lot of behavior from, a lot of do's and don'ts, the rights and wrongs. And without that person in your life, or more specifically, without both of them, any individual is less likely to be successful, no matter how you define success. So in Masonry, we do care deeply for the widow's son. And that's phrasing that we use verbatim for some of our degree work, is we talk specifically the widow's son. So that's very near and dear to many Masons' hearts.
Yep.
And hearing it in a video game pop up is like a bing, bing, bing doorbell.
Yeah, it like going back to that, it's that little Easter egg in the video game and in your life, because they kind of connect the two, and it's hard to explain, but it's just that connection that you're like, hey, this game just went up on my roster because it connects me to the video game, and I'm not just being the character for the time being. And it's like, okay, cool, in 10 years I'll forget about this game or whatnot. So, but no, that's really cool. I did not realize that they said that at the very end of it. So, point for you. Mm-hmm. Good job. You outsmarted the master, let's say.
But like, it's as you said though, there's sometimes there's the references that we see, they can have specific language that make us think not just, oh, there's some sort of connection there. It's like, oh, that's an intentional connection.
Yeah.
You don't use language like the widow's son without trying to make that link or trying to make that connection. You don't use language like the what was it from Batman again?
The Fraternal Order of the Stonemasons.
Yeah, you don't use words like stonemasons without trying to make that intentional connection between a potential audience member and this part of the game.
Yep. One game I did kind of want to touch on a little bit, but not go too drastically down that rabbit hole, because it is a deep rabbit hole, is the Fallout series. I know you haven't played, or I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, you haven't played a whole lot of the Fallout series.
Only Fallout 4, but I keep being yelled at by some of our friends about how Fallout New Vegas is the best one and needs to be placed at the top of my priority list.
It's up there. I'll admit it is really good. Fallout 4 is good. Fallout 3 is kind of my bread and butter, just because that's what I grew up on. I remember playing it on my brother's Xbox 360. For the listeners, just note, I was the kid that never had the game system. I always had to borrow it from someone else. Don't know how that ended up, considering I love video games and stuff, but any hoozles. But yeah, I remember spending so many hours, and my brother would always get upset with me because I would accidentally save over his last save or something, and it would get in arguments. But I didn't want to talk too much about Fallout, not because it's like, oh, they reveal stuff that we're not allowed to talk about. No, it is what it is. Like, they talk about stuff that we're allowed to talk about, but Fallout is one of those games that's based on the world around us, but if the Cold War would ended differently, if we went into a apocalypse kind of situation. So it's like, okay, yeah, they have Freemason stuff in Fallout 3, but that's because it's already there. Mm-hmm. If you go to Washington, D.C., you'll see, maybe not today because they've moved it or whatnot, they've renovated, updated the buildings, but you'll see those same symbols. So it's not like they took extra time to like, okay, we gotta put this square and compass over here in this corner so that one random player will find it. Hey, this is where it was in the building. This is where it's gonna be in the video game. Now, I will talk about, I believe it's a player kind of modification that just came out on Steam for Fallout. It's called Fallout London. And if you start playing that, you'll notice a lot of Masonic symbols here and there. One specifically, and I believe I unfortunately haven't had the time to play it or really look into it, but I believe it's a radio. And if you look at the face of the radio, it's got a square, a compass, and an A, which I found interesting. Yes, because for those listeners that are Masons, it's always square, compass, and a G. Like, ooh, I can talk about this. But then as I was starting to do a little bit more, I was like, all I'm doing is just talking about the Masons of the world today. And that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about video games and going back to our childhood when we were 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever, playing video games way late and drinking Dr. Pepper or Coke or Pepsi or whatnot and destroying our teeth and whatnot. So those listeners out there that are like, oh, I can't wait for the Fallout section of this episode. Sorry to disappoint you. I probably should have had this disclaimer a lot sooner than 45 minutes into the episode, but we're not going to really be talking about it. If you want, you can @ me on Facebook and just say, how dare you not talk about it? I mean, you can have a conversation. We can have a good conversation about Fallout and how Brother Ricky should definitely be playing New Vegas and he needs to stop playing Fallout 4 and switch over. Or we can have a conversation about how he needs to just forget about New Vegas and keep playing Fallout 4 because it is still a great game.
Oh, Fallout 4 is great. Right now, I've been playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I'm like 65 hours in, and I think I'm only like roughly the halfway point. It is phenomenal. Talk about a time sink. Oof. But I'm enjoying every moment of it. That's fine.
But well, I think we've got to my list. I'm looking at your notebook. No, listeners, I only have 3 pages where Brother Ricky has 4 or 5 pages front and back on a notebook full of this, so you can see who the actual gamer is. So, but is there anything on your list that you kind of want to touch on?
2 things I do still want to touch on.
Okay, I'm here for it.
One is when we talk about anything involving like the Illuminati or like a secretive group, a lot of people just associate Masonry with that. So there's so many different games where you can have that, we'll call it that lens of being able to think like, oh, like I wonder if that's related to Freemasonry, if that's related to Freemasonry.
Like the lens of truth almost.
Almost. But in this way, it's more like the lens of fiction because there are no ties between us and the Illuminati, if the Illuminati is even a real group. I mean, there's TV shows, movies, music even that makes fun of or touches on the topic of like the Illuminati. And again, if I were involved in a secret organization running the world, I would want to stay secret. I mean, we as Masons, most of our lodges have Facebook pages. There's so much information you can look up about us online all over the place. There's people who write about us. There's people who talk about some of the things that we do in like just a historical context, being like, oh, this is just some of the stuff they're involved in. I mean, you can't talk about the American War for Independence without bringing up Freemasonry because Freemasons were relevant and prominent figures on both sides of the war. They were leaders for the English just as much as they were leaders for the colonists. So when we talk about things like the Illuminati, there's so many references to the Illuminati in all sorts of games. One of my favorite references is actually from Kingdom Hearts, and it's one of the most confusing references. There's an organization called the Organization 13. But basically, Kingdom Hearts was like the first true love I had for video games.
Okay.
And it's funny that you talk about how you grew up being like the kid who never had the system or the games that was calling it from somebody else. I must have been maybe 10 years old, maybe 11. No, I was 10 or 11. I had a friend that started going to the school that I had moved to after a couple of years and saw this person. I was like, oh, I haven't seen you in so long. Like, how are things going? Blah, blah, blah. But they had a PlayStation 2 and I still had a PlayStation 1 and I had a game called Digimon Rumble Arena. They thought Digimon Rumble Arena was like the greatest thing. And so we would hang out so that he could play Digimon Rumble Arena. And when he showed me Kingdom Hearts on the PlayStation 2, I fell in love. Every other video game before that was like a high school crush. I knew at that point in time, this is what I like about games. But the storytelling experience was just so good for me back then. But the Organization 13 is like the Final Fantasy version of the Illuminati. It's the mysterious secret organization behind the scenes that are doing most of the things that spur on the events of the whole series. And there's so many different Kingdom Hearts games. It's wild. And there's so many. If you take the ideas of just like a conspiracy theory gone wild and you put that in a video game and you associate that with the idea of the Illuminati, that is the Organization 13. Like the storyline is so complicated for no reason, especially for what's supposed to be like a kid's game. Like, we're mixing Disney and Final Fantasy here, neither of which really go all too heavy in the mature themes, especially Disney. So, I mean, it's just really interesting that there's this like kind of goofy, complicated plot involving this secret organization. And that's like my favorite interpretation of the Illuminati, just because it's so convoluted and it just doesn't make sense and it doesn't work out the way they want it to. But that was one of the things I wanted to talk about. And then the other one is, do you know what one of the earliest interpretations of video games are, Brother Lion Turco?
What do you mean? Like, are we talking like, what's the old game on Atari? Are you going like back then, or?
I am talking about if we take the term video game and we think about it under a different, more contextual lens, we can even take the electronics away from it and still have video games. And there's a style of gameplay that predates like the Atari or the Sega or most of our current game development companies who come up with these wonderful worlds for us to explore on TV or monitor.
Okay.
It is the tabletop role-playing games. We even have some references to Masonry in these tabletop role-playing games. For those of you who love things like Dungeons and Dragons, for those who are big into the lore, there's this group called the Harpers, which is this secret organization that works to try to solve problems as they're happening throughout the world, but all their members are supposed to be secret, and they're known by handshakes or by rings or by a variety of different ways to kind of like keep themselves concealed. So there's this tabletop role-playing game called The Call of Cthulhu that actually, even in their core rulebook, they mention the use of Masonic rings specifically, because when we talk about Freemasonry, one of the stereotypes about Freemasonry is that a lot of Masons, a lot of brothers wear Masonic rings, partly to show that they're Freemasons, but it's also just a part of our culture because it's one of the ways that we can either have some pride or show off a little bit of who we are without being like really blatantly obvious about it. It's one of those like more subtler signs, and because of a lot of the culture and the ideas and philosophy behind Masonry in general, that subtler sign is a lot of what we focus on. That's a lot of what we try to value, or a lot of what we have the opportunity to value. And there's another tabletop role-playing game called Deadlands. And there's a character archetype called a Templar. And in their rule book, they actually have an example of a Templar being part of like a cult or something. And they have a description referencing Freemasonry as being like part of that character's background, perhaps. But it's another way that we can look at part of that storytelling experience where we get to be more active in the game or in the story itself, helping to make decisions or helping to see decisions come to fruition, making sure certain events come to light and happen the way that we're trying to. So these tabletop role-playing games are great examples of, that older kind of hands-on mechanic, which we care about so much for current video games today. And even for some of these older tabletop role-playing games, or some of these kind of like more obscure ways of just pursuing play, whether you're an adult or a teenager or whatever, there's still references to Freemasonry in these too. And it just goes to show that it takes a village, to raise a child. It takes an entire walk of life to really have a good idea of what's out there in life. No matter what kind of job you pursue, no matter what kind of career or academic process you pursue, Freemasonry is something that might be able to speak to you in some way, shape, or form. And just as you can take a specific lens and look at something and change out that lens for another lens and see how there might be some differences, kind of like if you watch National Treasure, not to get into too much movies that involve Freemasonry.
That's another episode.
Yeah. There's a point where there's like some glasses that Benjamin Franklin made up where it's got different colored lenses, but when we take the time to look at one topic or one idea with a different frame of reference than what we usually do, we can find out more about ourselves or more about the topic or more about the idea or the memory or the experience. And that is a big part of what Freemasonry is all about.
Yeah. Well, and it's amazing. Like what I said at the very first, Assassin's Creed. I always thought, this is going to be, the whole episode is just talking about Assassin's Creed 1. And then I was like, oh, shit. Because I joined the fraternity, I became a Mason, and I started looking at games with a different class in front. I started realizing, oh, no, Templars and Masons, like what you said, are not the same. Now, note some Templars are Masons and some Masons are Templars, but if you're a Mason, you don't have to be a Templar. If you're a Templar, you don't have to be a Mason. Like, they're just two organizations that kind of go hand in hand here and again. So, but no, it's amazing what just kind of looking at it with a different perspective and kind of looking with an open mind, what you can find and what things you can find from your childhood. Like Brother Sam talking about cartoons and stuff, I will have never guessed. Like, I was like, holy shit, like, what other things did I miss? And that's where we started talking about video games. And I was like, I gotta do some more research. We gotta find these. We gotta uncover the secrets. We gotta find the secret gold that we Masons always are claiming to have and stuff, or accused of having. But no, it's a wonderful world out there, really.
It really is, And I mean, there's so many different games that have some sort of reference or relevance to Freemasonry. There's games like Knight's Chase, Broken Sword series, Gabriel Knight. There's Call of Duty, Modern Warfare, and Black Ops. There's games like God of War Ascension, Borderlands 2, even GTA 5 all have references to Masonry in some way, shape, or form. Yep. And that's just the ones that I could find on, a little bit of time just Googling and searching through to see if I could find pictures of, or somebody else talking about it and be like, oh, okay, I do remember that. Or, oh, I never played that game, but like, I can see that happening, or somebody citing their resources. And it's just so interesting because this is, again, we're a quote unquote secret organization, but we're in all sorts of video games. There's symbolism all over the place. And in today's world, we have so many games that put in so much more effort for the settings and like the specific places that you go, and trying to make them as lifelike as possible. And there's so many different Masonic buildings and so much Masonic history in so many big towns throughout America, throughout most of Europe. Most major cities have Masonic temples. Most Masonic temples or Masonic buildings have a square and compass on them. Yep. So I wonder if there would be any way to kind of compile like a list of what video games have different cities and stuff, being able to go and find specific buildings based off their maps, and, see if we can find those symbols, see how realistic they have recreated, our everyday setting in real life, but just in the palm of our hands at the virtual landscape.
Yeah. I know for sure, me playing any video game, watching any movie, TV show, cartoon, whatever, I'm keeping my eye out open for it, because I know me and the wife just finished or caught up to a series, Outlander, and they have Freemasons. It's towards the end of the seasons and stuff, but they talk about the stonemasons and the Freemasons and stuff, because they're in early America and whatnot. And I remember seeing it and I just chuckling, and my wife being like, what? And I was like, I can't tell you, but it's funny, like, and stuff. So same kind of thing with video games is, when I see something, like I said, it kind of goes up in my ranks. Just, hey, they took the time to make sure this connected with these people, with the Masons of the world and stuff. And it also kind of makes me connect a little bit more with the game and stuff. I personally would love to see more secret Easter egg Masonic things throughout video games and whatnot, that only the people that really try to find them and stuff. I mean, one of my favorite things during my lunch break is to find those Easter eggs that people find, not just Masonic Easter eggs, but like any other Easter egg in Halo 2 or Call of Duty Black Ops in the story and stuff. Well, if you go to this wall and you back jump 3 times and then spin around, you phase through the wall, and then you can go down this corridor and find a secret skull or something. It's just kind of cool. Like, hey, someone took their precious time and made that.
Yeah, it's so interesting because it's like this little hidden, I don't know, almost like like finding the treasure at the end of a treasure map.
Yep.
And I don't know if you know much about some video game history. Do you know what the first Easter egg was?
I do not.
I'm not going to play out all the details. I'm sure some of the listeners know. But essentially, there was a game way back when where a developer was not allowed to put his name in the credits. And so in order to kind of, not to stick it to the man exactly, but essentially they were able to make a secret room in the game that you could only get access to before you beat the final boss by getting, like, you had to like get an actual quote unquote key and going to a specific pixel on the screen, and that's how you got access to the secret room, and you would see their name in the room.
I remember hearing about this and seeing. I can't think of the game though, and this is gonna bug me until you tell me.
I'll let you look it up.
You son of a B word. Because I as soon as you said pixel, I was like, yeah, like, oh, it's right there on the tip of my brain, but I can't.
But this idea, which stemmed from somebody not getting the recognition that they felt they deserved, and they should, have been able to do that. But that's where the idea of the Easter egg comes from. Is there's so many hidden elements in video games nowadays that it comes from this, what was once like a negative kind of idea or like some negative connotation. But now it's such a positive thing for players to enjoy seeking out and finding. We like the discovery of the mystery. We like finding out something that we didn't know was there.
Yep. So, but anyways, we've kind of chewed off your enough. It's been an hour and 2 minutes into this recording, so I think we should probably call it there, Brother Ricky. Thank you, listeners, so much for listening to us ramble and kind of going back down memory hole and or memory lane. Sorry, not memory hole. Lost for words tonight. But kind of reliving our childhood and talking about the video games we found in our research. So we appreciate everything you guys have been doing for us. All the likes, the follows, the shares, the comments, the posting on our Facebook page or social medias. I can't speak exactly for Brother Gabe or Brother Samuel, but I know I'm truly grateful for you guys. I'm sure they are too, and I'm sure once they listen to this episode, I probably will not be on any other episode by myself anymore. But I thoroughly hope you guys all enjoyed this episode, and I'd love to hear about some video games that you guys have played that you found those links to, or that just have a special meaning to you, and why. Because I love reliving old memories and like seeing other people's perspectives. So thank you guys again.
Remember, craftsmen, keep your working tools in order and always be on the level.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast do not reflect those of the Grand Lodge of Ohio, its officers, or any of its jurisdictions. They only represent those of the hosts or guests.